Okay, now we're live. Excellent. Caley, get us
Wonderful.
started.
Welcome, everyone. So today we are on Well, That Helps with Iridium Helps, and we are excited for a conversation with Keith, who's the founder of SmartRank. And so, Keith, thank you so much for joining us today. It's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, about hiring and talent and AI and, just the human experience of, making job transitions. So I think we've got a lot of stuff to cover with you. I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, to get started, what I'd love to do is, Keith, can you give us a little bit of background on how you started your organization and kind of what was the big challenge that you were hoping to address with SmartRank, and give us a little of the background, we'll say.
Okay. Yeah, so I've been in business about 23 years. About 20 of those years were spent as a hiring manager. So I've been hiring people for a long time. And from the very beginning, I always felt like this was a very broken process. I couldn't really identify exactly what it was, but something just felt off. And it didn't matter whether I was at a huge company like a Global 500 or at a startup. It was always the same process, which kind of I found odd. And it was always the same types of problems. And it wasn't just me. It was all of the other people that I worked alongside with, the other hiring managers, my colleagues. And so I always knew that I wanted to start my own company one day. And when I sat down and started thinking about what's the area that I think, could probably use, some significant help, it was in this space, in the talent acquisition space, just because I know there were so many challenges. And so then we did about a year's worth of research and really talking to candidates and recruiters and talent acquisition leaders and HR leaders to really understand more about their problems. And then I was like, okay, we definitely have something that we're starting to uncover some real challenges here that I feel like we could address with technology. And so then we started SmartRank about 4 years ago.
Very cool. So in that process, when you were doing the research, what stood out as like the biggest challenges, maybe from a candidate perspective, so like an individual seeking a new role, and then from a hiring perspective, from the actual hiring team, agnostic of if it was a talent acquisition, HR, or a direct hiring manager? What were those key challenges in each camp?
Yeah, well, there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot that came back, but I would say that we definitely found some pretty consistent themes and pretty consistent challenges. And one of those was efficiency. So, when you think about the process today of, how the recruiting process goes from a recruiter, pretty much every ATS works in the same way where you open up your requisition, you have a list of applicants and you start going through every single one of them chronologically. That is literally the most inefficient way to go through candidates and, opening up resumes and comparing them with job descriptions. I mean, you can't get more inefficient than literally looking at every single one, right? So that was one. And we started to find that, a lot of these groups, we were finding numbers like, a third of their day, a half of their day was spent just reviewing and screening applicants. And so we were like, wow, that is a massive time consuming process there. So that was one. The other one that we found, the other consistency we found both with the recruiters and with the hiring managers and even the candidates to some extent is it just wasn't very effective. Like when you look at, the amount of resumes going to a hiring manager and how many they're selecting. And then when you start equating that to things like quality of hire and turnover, and just when you start factoring in everything, you just start to see that it's not very effective. So we were like, well, what is driving that? And then we found a lot of other themes that, that drives lack of hiring manager engagement. DE&I was a big one that came up. So we were like, well, why is that such an issue? And so what it all really kind of distilled down to is really one big thing, which is that there's a disconnect between recruiters and hiring managers. I'm just going to put that out there and say that. I mean,
no way.
Absolutely not. It's let's just call it what it is. Like, you can't be a subject matter expert for every single role that you're hiring for.
Right.
I don't care if you've hired, a gazillion software developers in the past. It's not about finding number of years and who did they work for before and all those things. Those things are very surface level. When you talk to a hiring manager that's hiring a software developer, they don't really care 3 to 5 years of experience or, they've worked on X amount of projects. What they want to know is things like, can you build non-trivial queries with active record model associations and scopes? And are you comfortable with RSpec and dynamic text fixture generation? That is what hiring managers want to know. And that is the information they never get through a screening process. So they're given this handful of resumes and say, do you like any of these? Well, that shouldn't be the case. It should be, these are 10 of the 400 people that are the most qualified based on your very specific qualifications. Now pick which one of these you want to interview, because we know that they're all pre-qualified.
Well, and I think that's an interesting thing, and kind of from like our perspective is we always, even working as outside recruiters on the agency side, like it just always seemed so broken working, especially with these multi-layered companies where, there was a time when people had pre-screeners and that's all they did. And then screeners and then recruiters. And then there was the hiring manager, and it was just so convoluted and so disconnected, which is why people ended up the hiring managers. 90% of the time when we fill jobs for people, we're called by the hiring manager, because they can sit down and take, a minute and talk with us and get to the meat and potatoes of what's actually important, like you're talking about. So I think that's so interesting. I don't know how we ended up in that system, right? Like, I don't know who decided to just add 50 layers to the hiring cake, but give us a quick overview of SmartRank. I think that would be helpful for people to understand. Caley and I have seen the technology on the backside. It's super cool. So give us the 30,000 foot view of how SmartRank works.
So SmartRank is an applicant tracking system, but we don't like to call ourselves an ATS because actually, frankly, nobody likes ATSs, right? Like you'll rarely find people that are like, I love my ATS. At best, you're going to get, well, at least it's not like that piece of crap we used, at the last company. So we like to call ourselves as an ASTS, so an applicant screening and tracking solution, because one of the things that ATSs just don't do, they're going to start trying to do this with AI, and this is extremely dangerous. And if you want, we can talk about why this is in a moment, but they don't screen, right? They capture resumes, they capture applicants, and then you, the recruiter or the hiring manager or somebody at the company, has to manually go through each and every one of those and make that determination whether or not they're going to be qualified for an interview. And so, and some people on this that are listening to this right now are like, no, my ATS screens, I put in, do you require a visa? And I'm not talking about that. That's like very bare bones, like anything, yes, no type questions like that, anything can do. So what our system does is it is a full functioning applicant tracking system, but the biggest reason why companies buy it is because it has the screening, like really robust screening capabilities. So applicants come through, they answer highly specific questions that are ultimately derived from the hiring managers themselves. And we help them through generating questions through AI. So you don't have to nobody starts from scratch in our app as far as creating questions. Like we have thousands of questions you can choose from and then manipulate, or you can like a library that you can pull from, or you can just go and create them through AI. But the point is, you create these highly specific questions, and then literally every single applicant answers them. And when you do that, we still can capture a resume. We do, most of our clients still want to capture that, but they're not using it as the form of what they're using for screening. And when you remove the resume, all of a sudden you start fixing a lot of problems. So for instance, DE&I is a problem that everybody claims that they want to fix. But unless you get rid of the two biggest sources of unconscious bias, which is name and resume, good luck is what I would tell you, because it's unconscious for a reason, meaning you don't know you're doing it. And so what we can do is mask all that information. So you don't know if it's a male, a female. You don't know if what their ethnicity might or might not be based on their name, or you don't even know what college they went to or what years they graduated. All of that information is masked. It's just qualifications to do this role. Do they have them or don't they? And so for companies that really care about DE&I, they can actually put their money where their mouth is and turn that setting on. And then that allows for them to just look at qualifications and say, I want to meet with that person. And I can tell you with some of our clients, it has fundamentally changed the way that they look at candidates.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask about. So like, is it, I imagine it's really pretty cool to see from your perspective as companies start to change that setting, seeing them be like, oh shit, like I never would have looked at this person. I never would have looked at this person. Have you give us kind of a little bit of, if you can, kind of, how does that look from your perspective? Like, are hiring managers like, holy crap, I didn't know I was doing this, and now they see it? Or
let me give you a specific example.
Yeah,
one of our clients hires for a lot of different roles, but the majority of roles they hire for might be what you would consider more blue collar roles, right? So truck driving roles or welding type roles, those types of roles. And traditionally, I won't go into the whole background around how they would set up interviews, but traditionally, there would be some challenges with looking at females for those roles. And so now that they have that, because they turned that setting on, and they have hired hundreds and hundreds of people through. And so now these hiring managers, which by the way, were never engaged before, are very engaged now. But not only are they engaged, but they're looking at candidates saying, oh yes, I absolutely want to meet with this person. And then because what happens in our system is when you schedule the interview, that unlocks all the information automatically. So now you know their name, because of course you're going to need their name. It unlocks their resume and their college they went to and all that stuff that we masked. And then they're seeing this candidate and they're like, oh, that is a female. Interesting. Every qualification I want. So I want to interview them. And it has changed. I'm not trying to sit here and say, we've changed the whole landscape and now they were, not ever looking at women now, but it's changed the fact that they are now interviewing more women. They're hiring more women. Now, is it like, crazy numbers, switched in the other way? I don't know if it's that or not, but I do know from anecdotally from what I've been hearing from the recruiters that it's a significant improvement in just the amount of females that they're considering for these roles.
So I have a follow-up to that. So with the fact that now the hiring manager in this scenario understands where the skill set, the baseline skill set is for the individual that they're coming into an interview, you're saying like these hiring managers are a lot more engaged now. Is that also helping the conversations from the candidate perspective? So as this female getting a chance to go into the interview, are those interview conversations better? Are they improved? Is it shorten the time in making decisions? Like what's the next kind of domino in the effect on that?
Yeah, I just pulled this data. So in our app, you're not going to believe this. I'm going to tell you it and you're not going to believe it, but it is what it is. It is what we just pulled these numbers. But of the hires that were made in our system, 91% of them had 2 interviews or less.
That's crazy. That's so much less.
So the reason for that, there's no magic behind this, right? You're asking questions that you would typically ask in a first, second, and even a third interview in some cases, and that you don't find out in some cases until after they're even hired, which is the worst time to find out about this stuff. So what we're doing is we're forcing, I'll just say it, we're forcing a conversation with the hiring manager and the recruiter to make sure that they're spending the time on the front end to identify exactly what's needed, not figuring it out after they've already interviewed 12 people, not figuring it out, after they've looked at 400 resumes. Like, no, there's an enormous amount of time that gets wasted that is completely unaudited. Nobody ever looks at the amount of time that's wasted with recruiters and hiring managers on unqualified candidates. Imagine what that number is. It's massive, right? But nobody tracks that. So what we're doing is forcing them to say, what are you looking for in this position? Oh, well, it'd be nice if they had some certifications. That's not good enough. So, the way I give this description is the traditional hiring process is the recruiter is the one that's driving and the hiring manager is like in the back seat on their laptop, like No, take a left up here. And like, they're kind of like a backseat driver. And what this forces them to do is it switches the roles and it puts them in the hiring manager in the driver's seat. And the recruiter is the one that's behind saying, okay, let me kind of guide this from sitting back here, but you're the one that's driving. So now you can't tell me anymore that I'm not giving you qualified candidates because you're in the driver's seat. So what certifications are important? If you say certifications are important, you're going to tell me which ones are the most important. Well, I don't know, whatever. Okay, hold on. Let me generate an AI question for certifications for AWS. Which one of these are yeah, that one's good, that one's good, that one's good, that one's good, and that one's good. Okay, great. Now we're getting somewhere. But now we're getting to specifics instead of just certifications are preferred, or, AWS certifications are preferred, or, 3 to 5 years of this, or this, and this. Like, when all those little things in the job description are so confusing to the candidates, by the way. And
they are.
Yeah.
They totally are.
Well, I'm jumping in because I'm just like, I want to like shout this from the rooftops, because this, what you were just talking about with the time suck on the wasted time, not knowing what you want. When we do coaching on hiring better, that is the number one thing that we see, particularly with new managers, people who are hiring for the first time, and people who have, just started their own company and aren't quite sure what they're doing, is they have this concept that you just pick the job, job title, and like, that's it. And anything else just falls in line with it. And I think one of the things that's so interesting to me, and I'm curious if you see this, is when you start digging into the actual functionalities of a role, getting really specific with those questions that you're talking about, half the time we end up with coaching clients who are like, well, damn, I don't actually think I need to hire, or the job doesn't look like they think it's going to look. Is that something that you see with hiring managers on your side too, is as you drill down, the job itself is changing all the way through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tell all of our clients too, when we create this first set of questions, that doesn't mean that's the end all be all. This is an evolving thing that we're going to learn from. And we're going to learn from it when in two ways. One, we're going to learn from data, real quantitative data that we get back. So for example, if somebody says, okay, I will give you the detail. Here's 4 descriptions of what it means to be basic, intermediate, advanced, or expert in Python developing. And I'm only looking for expert. I want you to knock out every single other person unless they have expert level. And you're like, ooh, that might knock out a lot of people. I don't know how many it'll knock out, but it might knock out a lot. You're going to run into that issue. But if you come back with data to that if you come back with an anecdotal conversation, it's not going to go well, because they're going to assume and make a lot of opinions and assumptions about you as the recruiter. And especially if you're an agency recruiter and it's something that's like comp, like, hey, we're going to pay this person 80 grand. You're like, ooh, I think that's a little cheap. And then they come back and you come back and you're like, we're not finding people, they're looking more for 120. They're like, you trying to up your fee here? Is that what's happening? So, but if you come back with data and you say, listen, we had 276 people apply for this role and 8% are willing to accept that salary. Now, this isn't my opinion. We independently asked all 276 of these applicants, and this is what they independently told us. So that means 92% of the applicant pool is sitting over here. We're not even looking at them. Oh, by the way, do you want to look at the 8%? Let's look at this 8%. And you click on another button and you see, okay, the highest percent match to what you said you're looking for is a 24% match. So this is going to make our decision real simple. You can either hire that 24% top match person that's willing to accept your salary. Okay, that's an option. But there are 24% coming in. You can lower your standards and say, okay, we're going to just ask for less qualifications across the board. You can reduce or you can up the salary. But like, these are your choices that you have, right? Because essentially you're looking for a purple and pink polka dot and unicorn that doesn't exist. And I'm not just telling you that from my opinion. I'm showing you data that backs that up. So it just fundamentally changes the conversation when you have data like that. Completely changes the conversation. Because I'll tell you, hiring managers, you come back and tell them that you can't find what they're looking for. They got all kinds of things in their mind, right? And the other thing is, back to that Python example, you come back and you say, this thing you're looking for narrows our scope down to only 2% of the applicant pool, right? So it doesn't have to be a comp thing. It could be a qualifications thing,
Absolutely.
or they have to live within 5 square miles of our headquarters. Okay, that takes us down to 0.005% of the population. And here are those people. Every one of them was knocked out of the process according to your qualifications. So, but back to your original question too, the second thing is it helps you to identify then where you need to make changes. So we'll put out a set of questions, we'll get back 30 applicants, and then we'll look at that data and look at the applicants. And then they may even interview a few of them, and they'll be like, well, a few of these are still not the people we're looking for. And we'll be like, why? And they'll be like, well, because they don't have this and this and this. Well, we didn't ask that in the questions. Do you want to ask that now? Oh, yeah, we definitely. And let's change this question and let's alter this. And now we're starting to hone in on what we need, because you're right. They may not know exactly what they need from the very beginning.
I think so from this, one of the things that comes to me with is when we work with the Hiring Better and Managing Better programs, we often find that because of the lack of clarity from jump for individuals joining a team, it often can trickle down, and you can see those issues about clarity on skill set needed or level of expertise in certain types of things, like Python, for example. Those emerge later on downstream as performance issues. So in a way, having the conversations and understanding the parameters that are absolutely necessary to be successful and putting those on the very, very front end of the endeavor can ultimately help you manage a team and an individual's performance down the road with kindness and clarity, right? So, I mean, even though it's only talking from a talent perspective, right, from that acquisition stage, Keith, it's also kind of having a positive net impact downstream for the experience for the individuals in the role and the team lead as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would imagine if I'm an applicant, right, this is the number one reason that we see people come to us for coaching is fundamentally they're in a job that is out of alignment with what they thought they were going to get. So here's the job description, you interview, everybody's stoked, high fives, and then you get into the day-to-day, which is when we get into that kind of qualifications and actual work piece of it. And they're like, fundamentally, this isn't the job I thought it was going to be, or I do not enjoy the things that I thought I was going to enjoy. And so in my mind, if I'm an applicant going through this process, if I'm getting asked more questions that are getting more and more specific, I am getting a much clearer picture so that by the time I hit my interviews with the two people, I'm like, yeah, genuinely, I think this is a good fit. And I do think I'm qualified. Is that something that you've heard from folks that have been through the process as an applicant?
100%. I don't know if this is rare or not, but we receive positive sentiments from candidates. I don't know if this exists where people are applying on Workday and they're like, hey, Workday, I just want to let you know, you guys did an amazing job with this. But anyway, we do get some of these.
You were fucking checkboxes, please.
Yeah, or Taleo, or any of these, Rippling. I mean, there's no way that they're saying, yes, I enjoyed this experience.
Your entire resume into this box, please. Thank you.
And here's what we hear. And then we also ask our clients, what are your candidates telling you after you hire them about, how was the hiring process? How was it? We're always looking for feedback. And so there's two things that happen that we've gotten from the applicants that is really good. One is what you just said, Whitney, exactly. For the first time, here's a quote, and I'm paraphrasing it because I may not get it verbatim, but it is basically a quote that said, this is the first time I've ever, by the way, I know I'm not going to move forward in the process. That's how they started the thing. And they said, but this is the first time I actually knew why, because I knew what the company was actually looking for. This is the thing that recruiters get so angry at candidates all the time, because they're like, why did they even apply to this? It says proficiency in Excel for an accounting role. And you're like, but here's the thing. Every job description has familiarity with, knowledge of, experience in, expertise with. All of that means nothing if you don't define what it means. If you don't define it, it is 100% subjective. So that candidate applied for the role thinking, I know how to put numbers in cells. I'm absolutely proficient. Just because you didn't define it and the hiring manager didn't define it, that's not on the candidate. That's on you guys. So, but if you were to say, by the way, expert means that, and what we're looking for this role would be expert or at least advanced. And that means you can do VBAs and macros and power pivots and things like that. They're going to see that and they're going to be like, yeah, I don't even know what those things are, but I can do this basic stuff that you said here. And they're going to click that one because they're like, that's the one that I can do. And now they're like, and look, candidates are not dumb. So they know, and this is the leading into the second thing that they realize, which is that they're probably going to maybe have a chance or probably not have a chance at moving forward. This is the only way they know, because today they either don't hear it all, they hear it, they get an immediate rejection letter, right? And they're like, I don't understand. I think I'm totally qualified for this role. But in our system, when they're answering these types of questions, like that example I gave earlier about a Ruby on Rails developer, that level of detail, they're like, oh man, like when they keep answering 0 years and no experience with this and 0 and basic proficiency in this, and they get through, they know there's chance I'm because I actually know what you're looking for now that you've defined it, and it's definitely not me. So yeah, submit, but I totally expect a rejection letter.
Well, so I think one of the things that is an aha for me in this kind of process, right, and talking about like, hey, let's remove the concept of a resume, right? Let's remove the concept of matching, a job posting or a job posting out on the site, right? Let's strictly talk about skills and what are necessary and have this dialogue on the front end back and forth. One of the ahas that I have in this is it removes that terribly salesy process that both parties find themselves in, right? In the job search, because of the fact that you're going into the actual meat and potatoes of what's needed instead of spending, multiple conversations on the niceties or the performative elements, right? So it kind of cuts through the performative kind of skills. Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of nice and refreshing because neither party really enjoys the performance. Let's be honest.
I agree with you, Caley. I think one thing to back on the defining it piece is it's defining it, but it's also giving the context, which I think is huge.
Yes.
So rather than saying, I want somebody who can do, design work in Canva for marketing efforts. Well, what does that actually mean? Is that you want somebody who's going to be copy pasting, and that's the extent of what that means? So having the context to go with what the performance and the actual definitions are, I think is also an interesting thing.
Yeah. I'll give you one example that is just at almost every company. So almost every company hires salespeople, right?
Yeah.
And BD, salespeople, AE, whatever you want to call it. The biggest companies have hundreds or maybe even thousands of these roles. The smaller ones may only have a couple. I've hired hundreds of salespeople, and here's what I can tell you: if you pull up any of those job descriptions for any company, it could be Amazon, Salesforce, or it could be some small startup. Doesn't matter. You pull up any job description for a salesperson, I would tell you 50 to 60, maybe 70 or even 80% of those are all going to be words that are completely subjective, which means that they are things like, I want somebody with a hard work ethic and grit and determination and good customer, skills and knows how to, read a customer, knows how to, discover, what the needs of the customer are and blah, blah, blah. Nonsense. This is all nonsense. That is all wasteful stuff that's in there. You know what's never in those? We're going to be wanting to know what size of an organization you sold to, what level of an organization you sold to, what average deal size you had at your last job, and what your average deal size has been. I want to know what specific industries that you've sold into. I want to know if you sold to existing or new customers. That's the stuff that's always missing. That's never in the job description. And it's like, Why? That is literally the most important thing. Your job, should you come work here, is you're going to be selling to Fortune 500 companies in the financial services sector, and you're going to be selling SaaS solution, and you're going to be doing a full cycle sales, meaning you got to start from prospecting to discovery to demo to negotiation and closing and all the way through. So you got to do all these things, and you got to have, it's all brand new business. So if you look at somebody that came from Google and they had a massive team and they were not full cycle. They had this little tiny piece of the sales process, but they sold $4 million because their contracts are so big. And it was all existing customers. And like all these opposite things. And they were selling to small to medium-sized companies, not to Fortune 500. Like, they're going to be like, ooh, they worked at Google. They must be an amazing salesperson. Let's move them through the process. And you've completely missed all of the important things they're actually going to do when they get in there on day one. Find one job description for an account executive that has those things that I just mentioned, and I'll buy you guys both breakfast or coffee or lunch or something one day when you guys are back in Denver next.
I mean, all of ours need to have that moving forward, right? Whit, everybody listening to this, definitely. This is the key thing. So then I have a question. So then, because if you think about your description of how the classic kind of job posting process works, it seems like it takes like the classic HR component of let's do values-based hiring, right? We want the person to share the values of the organization, values of the team, kind of like the cultural elements. And they put that heavily into the job postings and then use the hiring process, the next steps to basically identify the skills gaps or skills needs. So in this scenario, in the scenario you're putting forth, you kind of flip that, right? You're talking skills first, and then like where do your clients blend the values-based kind of screening process into it? How is that involved?
Yeah. It's not, so we have lots of different types of questions, right? Skills, what we consider skills-based questions are actually like, show us you know how to do this. So some of our clients, like for developer roles, will have like a code-based question in there. It's not meant to replace like coding assessments. I think those are great. We complement those, but they'll put one or two questions in there to be like, you should know what this is. There's educational. Some roles require certain levels of education, like, in some need like nursing needs certain certifications and stuff like that. So that's a different one. Proficiency levels is another type of question. Cultural questions can be in there too. And what we also call situational questions, right? Which is, look, there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to know how you think about this situation. So you have a client that calls up and they say that they're going to cancel their contract today because they're tired of using your software. Which of the four would you be most likely to do? Like, I'm not asking, it's not wrong. Whatever you think is the right one is totally up to you. And one of those might be, I would immediately go get my manager so that they can, help me come up with the right solution to save the customer. Well, that sounds great. But guess what? When they come on board, if that's the selection that they choose, every issue they have, they're going to probably go get manager, rather than try to figure out what's going on. The right answer to that might be, at least according to me, because this is what my answer would be, is ask them questions. What's going on? Why are you unhappy? Like that's your first, you're the first line of defense there. Figure out why they're leaving, right? So there's situational and cultural things that you can put in there on the front end, but we don't want to have 25 questions in here, right? Like, these are multiple choice and they're multi-select, and this should be information that the candidate already knows, and they certainly know about themselves. So it doesn't take long. The thing about any type of assessment on the front end is in the research I've done, it has to be fast, it has to be easy, and it has to be relevant to the role. If you are trying to put forth like a behavioral or an aptitude assessment when they're just applying for a role, it's not going to work. A, they're not going to spend the time to do it. B, they're like, I don't even know if you're considering me. Why am I going to spend 20 minutes doing this, assessment thing when it's not even relevant to the role? But if it's a developer role and you're asking me about my proficiency level with this particular language, that's perfectly par for the course. That's great. Yes, I'm actually glad you're asking me about that. So yeah, cool.
That definitely helps me understand. So it's a blended process, for lack of better ways to say it.
Yeah.
On the front end. Okay. That
Look,
definitely helps.
one of our clients has they put travel required in their job description. They had huge turnover, and I was like, well, what's going on? And they're like, well, I don't know. We put travel required in there, and I'm like, well, how much travel are they doing? They're like, about 75%. I said,
Oh my
that's a lot.
God.
I said, that's a lot of travel. No wonder, right? So in there, we have a lot of like very specific qualification questions about whether or not they know how to do that particular job. Like it might be a welding job. But we have questions in there like, are you willing to work outside in 90-degree heat and, freezing cold, like 0 degrees, windy, all these things, right? And what percent of the time are you willing to travel? And what we'll find is people that are really, really qualified to do the role. Like they are amazing welders, but they'll just tell you, I'm not willing to work outside in any of these conditions. Okay, well, that's not going to work. Or I can't travel at all. Or I can only travel 25% of the time consistently week after week. Well, that's not going to work either. I don't care if you're the best welder in the world. This role requires you to travel a minimum of 75%. And vice versa. We'll find people that are like, I'll travel 100% and I'll work in any condition you want. But I do not have these skills that you're looking for. So all they're working with is the people that have both of those, right? You have the skills and you're willing to do the qualifications that this role requires. And they are stack ranked and they're up at the top, and that's who they focus their time and energy with.
Very cool.
It's funny because I think, at least with us, and kind of maybe Caley, I'm overstepping this by saying with both of us, but one of the things that I think have seen, maybe you can speak a little bit to the differences, but I think working with hiring managers that are women versus working with hiring managers that are men, and just general approaches to hiring being fundamentally different. And I think that is something, especially in kind of this monolithic, Indeed oriented world that we live in, where everybody is kind of forced to do the same thing, where it's like, oh yeah, you have a job, you put it on Indeed, whatever, is that women want to hire, we're exactly right. It's like, it's more about being liked in the process as a individual and as a company, and
Interesting.
basically selling the concept, right? And so you've got this weird dual people pleasing dance that goes on over here. And then when you're working with hiring managers that are men, it's very much like, well, what are you going to do for me type of approach. And so I just think it's so interesting, because being able to do a questions based actual skills, and like not just skills, but like data driven approach, I'm just so fascinated by this.
Well, so this brings up a really important topic, and specifically what it has to do with women when they're applying for roles as well. And this actually goes back to something you said earlier, Caley. You said the word job posting, right?
Yeah. I hate those.
But here's the interesting thing, is that there are two separate things. There are job descriptions and there are job postings. Everything all right, Whitney?
I have no idea what that was, and I can see the dog. So I'm like, am I about to get attacked? Is there a burglar?
What's a monster in your closet? Like
mountain lion. We live in Colorado.
I don't know. Sorry about that. I didn't.
No,
I was hoping nobody could hear it.
So let's just clear this up, right? You have job descriptions and you have job postings. Okay. Now, these are two separate things. One is a legal document, job descriptions, and job postings should be more of a marketing, like, this is why you want to come work for this company, and this is what we offer you, and enticing people to want to come there. Over time, we've just melded these into one. And then not only did we meld them into one, but then we threw them on the internet, and now everybody just copies those. Oh, I have no idea what a CI/CD developer is going to be. Google CI/CD. Great. Here's a job description. Pull that one, and everybody keeps pulling the same ones and just using the same crap, and it's crap, right? And so the issue there is that what you end up doing, and this is a fallacy, is that people are going to self-select themselves out of the process based upon this list of qualifications that you put out there. Like, this is the thing that they think the only people that might do that are females. And
Yeah.
this is the thing that is really messed up about it, is that, you know, when you list out, so this is for the hiring managers out there, this is for anybody, but like when you list out this exhaustive list of qualifications, you're basically saying, I want more men to apply, because the more of those you put in there, the less women are going to apply, because statistically they need to, you know, the stat is that they need to be 100%. I don't know if that's like totally accurate, but it's significantly higher than men. I know that, like by a factor of like 30, 40, 50 percentages, right? Men will look at something and say, oh, I'll figure it out when I get there, or, you know, whatever. And women are like, no, I don't have all of these. I've seen it with my own wife when she's looking at roles. Like, I have 9 out of the 10, I'm not going to apply to the role. Why? Because I don't have this one thing that they're asking for, and they're going to find that out. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you're probably more qualified than 90% of the people that are going to apply for this. You should be applying for that. So it's a big issue from that perspective, right?
It is.
And the more vague and ambiguous, the more that the female is going to think about, well, they're probably looking for, you know, and they're going to go the opposite direction than men are going to go. Like, if you say, you know, do you have proficiency in Excel? A female, and I'm generalizing, so please excuse that, but when they look at that qualification, the more vague and ambiguous it is, they're going to say, oh, they're probably looking for somebody that knows how to do like pivot tables and all this, like, you know, power pivot and all these crazy things in Excel that I just concatenate, and VLOOKUPs and stuff I don't know how to do. And a guy's going to look at that same exact bullet point and say, oh, they're probably just wanting people that know how to put numbers in cells and do that whole summy thing, right? So
Yeah, got it.
That's me.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a major problem, because the more of those you put in, thinking that you're somehow going to dissuade people from applying and they're going to self-select out. No, you're just reducing the amount of females that are going to be applying. So there's a problem there. What I would hope, and what I would love to get to, this is like a perfect world scenario for us, is to get to a point where our customers, and I would like to see this in the world as a whole, where you have, these are all the reasons why this is a great company to work for, okay? This is a job posting, not a job description. This is a job posting that says, these are all the reasons that, here's what the job duties are. Like, you want to know what you're going to be doing, so that's fine. Here's why you want to work here. These are all the, you know, the great things about, you know, the benefits of working here and everything. And then under qualifications, it says, just apply. Just, we'll let you, you're going to know, and we're going to know when you apply whether or not you're a fit for this role. I promise you. So don't worry about the qualifications. There are none. And everyone on this is like pie in the sky thinking, Keith, that's not true at all, because the qualifications we qualify for, like, that's what our software does, is it specifically goes through all of those bullet points you might put on a job description for qualifications. You can just wipe them away, because we can reverse engineer those into very specific questions in the actual application process, which is so much better for everybody. It's better for the hiring manager, the candidate, and the recruiter. And it makes things much more efficient. So that's where I would like to get to one day, is basically just getting rid of that stupid section that takes up this amount of space that says qualifications, because it's only doing harm to the process right now.
It is. So like the functionality of having a system that can support to do like the Rubik's cubing of the qualifications behind the scenes is super helpful in that scenario. So like with that mission, it's a great mission. I think one of the other things I wish that we did with job postings along those lines is, beyond like just saying like, this is what we want you to do, I think we need to share outcomes. Like, I think one of the other things we don't talk about on job postings is like, we don't say like, hey, this is our goal. This is the goal for this role. This is what it's going to take to meet what we're talking about is excelling in this position. Because just to say like, hey, I need somebody with, you know, Excel skills. What is the Excel skills getting us? Like, is it, we want them to be able to, you know, crunch a large, vast historical data set that we need to be able to utilize for future product development or something, you know, who knows, whatever the heck it is. We don't talk about outcomes And therefore it's like it's a huge missed opportunity, I think, in the realm too. So I love your just apply motto. That should be a t-shirt, dude. You should get t-shirts.
Just apply.
Instead of one click apply or quick apply or all these stupid, ridiculous things back to your job boards you were talking about earlier. Like that is just, that's ridiculous.
Well, and I think the sad truth of it is like, I'm a geek. I love AI. Like, I think we can utilize AI in so many really, really fucking cool ways. But I will tell you, the surface skimmer level of AI use right now in terms of like for assistance with like resumes and job postings and things like that, where it truly is just a conduit for copy paste mentality, is just crushing us. Caley, I mean, I think we even wrote a blog about it, but Caley put out a posting for one of our clients and
for an engineering role. What was it? 15 resumes that were eerily similar, almost identical. Like, I mean,
that were like literally the exact same resume.
Yes.
And then I had 20 messages sitting in my LinkedIn inbox that were all used on the AI for LinkedIn for connecting to the hiring manager to like say hello and introduce yourself. And people hadn't changed a damn thing. So I literally got 20 of the same, practically the same copy and paste things through LinkedIn. So I'm sitting here thinking like what this tells me about the candidate is that might not be like I'm inferring information about a candidate because they're using a tool inappropriately or inadequately.
Yeah.
And it actually is going to have a negative connotation to how you perceive them for the opportunity. Like they might be kick-ass engineers, but the fact that like they sent me the same exact resume that 15 other people did with just their names of their companies and the dates different, and the communication was identical to the other 20 people that I got the LinkedIn message from. Like to me, in my experience, looking at that, they look exactly like the other candidates. There's no distinguishing factor on it, right? Because there was
That's right.
Nothing different. Sorry.
It was interesting about that too, is I was like, Caley, that's friggin' weird. So like took the resumes, right? And then went to multiple different GPT, like, so we tried Claude, we tried Gemini and Chat GPT and put it in and tried to reverse engineer it. Here are some resumes I've got. Here's the job posting that was out for this. Help me understand what prompts were likely used in order to get these results with these resumes. And it's just like really interesting because in my mind, that's where the distinguished piece from the candidate perspective could come in. It's like, I don't have a problem with you using a, LLM to try to do something different, right? Because it shows me you're willing to try new things. Mm-hmm. But I am curious, like, what was your process in that? How were you thinking about it? How are you approaching it? If it's, plug and go, here's my LinkedIn profile, create me a resume. I want to know what the conversation is, I guess is how I would phrase it.
Well, to piggyback on it, it goes back to like the specificity, right? The specifics are what matter in this hiring process. And I think specifics from like, if you're going to put your information into an AI model to use, that's important. It's like, it's only as valuable as the data you give something, whether that you're the candidate pulling your information together, or if you are the hiring team pulling all of your information together, the specifics freaking matter.
Yes. And so, wow, you guys just opened up a really big, like discussion point here. Okay.
Do we need to do a part 2 all AI?
No, we probably should, but I'll try to make this really simple. You know how candidates, one of their biggest frustrations is, submitting their resume and then they have to go in and retype it all.
It sucks. Why do we do this?
Yeah.
This sucks.
Okay. Why is that the case?
Yes.
Like if you get to the root cause, why is that the case? The reason is because all resumes are different, because you allow for the candidate to create that resume in design or, in Illustrator or in
Mhm.
Word or whatever. They're in control. So therefore, you have 50 different formats. I know this because we have parsing in ours, right? But no parsing technology is going to be perfect.
Right.
Ours is really good, but it's not perfect. And none of the other ones, some are better than others. But the reason is not because the parsing technology sucks so bad. It's because they have so many different types of formats that are coming in. So unless every single candidate had one single format, like a TXT file, that was a standardized format in this is where you put education, this, then everything could be parsed 100% perfectly. Okay, why am I bringing this up? Because this is what you're seeing now is you're allowing the candidates to now have control with AI tools to, formulate the resumes and everything. So now you're seeing this parity amongst all these. Just to give you a couple stats, in 2023, there was a research study that came out. 46% of people were doing exactly what you said. They were using AI to take the job description, their resume, throw it into ChatGPT and say, pump out a new resume that matches as many keywords. They've caught on. They figured out how the game works in recruiting. They know it's keyword matching, and they've figured out a way to game the system. So less than a year later, in 2024, in April, they did another study came out, and it was already up to 70%. Like, this is a massive amount of things. So what you're going to see is parity. Now, I'm going to lead this into the biggest problem here, which is the world around talent acquisition has been and is continuing to change. Okay. So this started changing when the internet came out, because they had to start getting ATSs. That was a big change. And then then you had job boards. There are over 50,000 job boards that exist today. 50,000 job boards. So you have all of these job boards, you have all these candidates, and then you have things like one-click apply. So all these are just specific examples of all the things around talent acquisition that change, but talent acquisition as a group has not changed and evolved. So they're still using the same tools in the same way that they were 25, 50, 70 years ago. That is a problem because they're not evolving at the same pace that everything is moving around. Now you have AI, and AI is, this is a game changer for, a true game changer. So now you have this train coming. And as I tell people, you can either get on the train or you can get hit by the train, but those are your two options. You don't have I just want to sit by and not do anything. That's not an option. You either get on the train or you get hit by it, but one of the two is going to happen. And so in AI, okay, I'll just say this, and this should be another episode, but I'll say this really quick. Major issues right now that everybody on this call should be aware of. One is the legislation that is occurring. And I could give more data on this, but the problem is that every HRIS and every ATS have figured out that the number one most time-consuming thing that a recruiter does is screen and review candidates. So what do you think is the number one, and this isn't Keith's opinion, this is according to the data out there, what is the number one thing that they're looking for AI to do? Screening. Right.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, it will do it faster than a human, and it will even probably match more technical keywords together than a human could. Oh, this is 72.6% keyword matched, right? But what it will never be able to, I hope it will never be able to do, or we're all in trouble and we need to move to Panama because, and live on a deserted island, is it can't tell you what the person meant when they wrote that. Meaning, if it says I'm proficient in Excel, AI still cannot tell you, oh, that means that person knows how to do these functions within Excel. It cannot do that. So it's not going to work. But the bigger issue is the legislation that's coming out now is saying you can't have ADS. If you have ADS, which is automated decision systems, meaning a human isn't involved, then in making the decision on how you're stack ranking these people and everything, you're going to need to provide, first of all, reporting on the front end. You're going to need to provide periodic reporting and testing on this. You're going to need to be, you're the one that's held responsible. If there's an issue and somebody comes back and it shows that your AI algorithm that you're using in that software is biased or discriminatory in any way, you're not going to be able to turn to the company and say, oh, but but I just bought the software. No, you're the one that's held responsible. You're the one that's going to get fined. You're the one that's going to have to do reporting to the EEOC for the next 3 years. The software company isn't held liable at all. And if you don't believe me in this, look at look at their 163-page terms and conditions, and you will see in there algorithmic content. It's specific, because I don't know if you guys have seen or heard on like Sirius XM, but they're always like, Indeed matches candidates, and they have this whole marketing thing about we match candidates and we can give you the best candidates and blah, 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 blah. It's all
horseshit.
BS, bullshit, marketing stuff. Okay. At the end of the day, they're taking the resume and the job description, if you look at the fine print, and they're comparing those to see if the keywords match, right? Yeah. Just like humans have been doing for 70 years. However, if you look in the terms and conditions, they'll tell you, we do not guarantee that this works, that it's legal, that this is not biased, that this is, and they list it all. Furthermore, you will indemnify us if there's any type of issues that come up that arise from this. We take zero responsibility that this product does anything that we said that it would do. And you are 100% responsible to have a human involved in making your decisions on what you do. And that has no association with us. And you're like, well, that sounds very different from their marketing message. Well,
right.
It should.
Yeah. Totally different. Well, oh, go ahead, Whit. Sorry.
I was just going to say, we totally should do another conversation, because one of the other things that I think is so interesting is like talking about like behemoth systems not keeping up. I was just listening to a podcast about how friggin' difficult it is to get wildland firefighters hired, like because the Forest Service is relying on technology that is inherently still biased against people who have criminal records, even though 90% of our wildfires come out of CAL FIRE and are ready to work, but then they have to sit on their hands for months. Anyways, it's a whole thing. Fascinating. And I think we could really do another episode and geek out on it, because it just AI in general.
Well,
huge.
I was at a get together, like a mixer type of a thing, and somebody came up to me and they were like, "Oh, Keith, you're the hiring guy, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'm the hiring guy." Yeah. And they go, "What do you think is the biggest problem right now?" Because I hear people lamenting about this all the time. I do too. I get at least every single week, I get at least one LinkedIn message or email or something from a friend that I've worked with in my career saying, "Why is this so jacked up?" Because they know I'm in the space and they're like, "Why is this so broken?" So I'm at this mixer and she says, "What do you think is the biggest problem with this recruiting? Like, why is the hiring so bad?" And I said, it's one word: intentionality. This you're not going to fix right off the bat. Intentionality at the highest levels of an organization, at the hiring manager level, at the recruiter level. Like, there's just, people talk about, we want the best people. We want to hire the best people. But they don't put any money. They don't put any resources. They don't put any, intentionality behind really doing it. Oh, we want to have the best screening. Well, then are you willing to sit down and really identify exactly what that hiring manager? No. I wouldn't want to bother the hiring manager with that. We'll just look at hundreds of resumes and waste their time sending them dozens of resumes. And then we'll just pray that they're going to love one of them that they want to hire.
Yeah.
Really? Like, that sounds like the best way forward? Well, I wouldn't want to bother a hiring manager. So, there's no intentionality behind any of this stuff. And until that's there, companies are going to continue to struggle over and over and over and over again.
Well, and I would extend that to job hunters too, right? Mm-hmm. So I was recently doing some coaching with a gal. She'd sent over 100 resumes. And when you get down to it, and she's like, "Well, I'm not hearing back." And of course you hear numbers like that and you're like, something's amiss, right? So like, let's look at this. And it's something that I think we see a lot in our coaching practice is, a lot of times people don't think about the intention or what they're actually looking for. Like, what do you actually want to spend your time doing? Because I think it's just, whether it's the motivation of title or comp, whatever it might be, it's like, at the end of the day, there are some people who are like, you know what? I went and paid and I got a degree and I really enjoy being a groundskeeper. So I'm going to go to workingcouples.com and I'm going to find a place where me and my partner can go do that at an RV park in the middle of Montana. And
Sounds
it's
great.
like, you don't get to those realizations unless you get really serious about what the intentionality is with you, your time, and what you want to do in your life. And so,
very true.
Yeah.
Well,
No, it's very
even
true.
you even add the layer of, we have made a mandated system with unemployment on proof of applying to so many different jobs as part of the process to receive that benefit. And like
Right.
all that's doing is it's creating additional noise in the marketplace in the same way. So like we're wasting each other's time. We're wasting an entire ecosystem of people's time because of the way these classic structures are set up, right? And
Yeah.
you add AI, it means we can waste time faster.
And more of it.
I've read articles of people, and I actually know of people that have written scripts that just apply to all the roles. Like they've written the script to go through, and when it says ask for resume, submit this document, and when it says this, put this in. Like, so they're applying like 400 a day. And Whitney, to your friend that you mentioned earlier, I would say, and I would say this to anybody right now that's looking for a role. The system is so broken now. Do not waste 1 minute of your time applying to roles on traditional applicant tracking systems. Just don't. Like it doesn't work. Okay. Even if they get to your resume, because again, they're looking at it, most of them, 99% of them are looking at it chronologically, which is the worst way to look at it. But even if they get to your resume, and I say this in the nicest way possible, but they're just not subject matter experts enough to know based upon, and it's not their fault. They're looking at a document that's got everything that the candidate wants you to know about them. It's not enough context and detail and specificity to be able to give you what you need. So it doesn't work. Okay. So my suggestion would be, the only way that I know of people getting interviews, the only way is back to the way that we were doing it like 50 years ago, which is through the network.
Networking.
That's it. And if you can't do the network thing, which is the number one way to do it, and that means you need to do research. Don't spend your time applying to 100 roles. Take that time and research the shit out of the company that you really want to go to. To your point, Whitney, about the candidate having intentionality behind, where do you really want to work? What type of company do you really want to be at? And then find somebody there that's connected to somebody you know on LinkedIn and figure out a way to get in. The next best way to do that, if you have no connection there, and I saw this happen the other day, is a friend of mine. You know how every once in a while people will go on LinkedIn and post a role that they're hiring for?
Yeah.
And they'll say, hey, we're looking for this, but no agencies, no recruiters. Like they put that, but they're like, but I do need to hire, and this is a really good channel to do that. So I had a friend reach out to me and say, hey, would you mind going on there and commenting on the post and saying, you should be looking at this person? And she did that with a few other people, because I went on there and I'm like, oh, I know that person. I know that person. I know that person. And so her name popped up like 4 or 5 times. And then people commented to those people saying, yeah, she's amazing. And she is amazing, by the way. She is phenomenal at what she does. But she would have never gotten noticed by this hiring manager ever if she went through the traditional ATS recruiter, screening process. I bet you she would have probably gotten an automatic rejection when she is unbelievably qualified. So putting in all these, so she went a roundabout way of asking us to please go and comment. I was like, of course I'll go do that for you. So I went and commented, and I said, I would hire her tomorrow if I was hiring for this role. She's phenomenal, hands down the best person I ever worked with in this role. And she had 5 or 6 other people. That the hiring manager is like, okay, that kind of seems a little coincidental that all these people are saying the same person. And at the same time, they're all saying really positive things. So at a bare minimum, you're going to probably get an interview. That's where your friend should be spending her time.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So true.
I was just thinking, like, all the little hacks. Remember, like, back in the day when people first started using applicant tracking systems, and there was that whole movement where people were like, copy paste a whole layer of keywords in white behind your resume. I mean, people come up with new things, but I think fundamentally it always is the networking. You're exactly right. We can't espouse that enough.
Dude, I mean, I even remember hand typing resumes into the correct format so that it could be picked up by the ATS system at our mom's recruiting agency, like in our high school years. So like this is like 20 years ago at this point. So I mean, it's always been a lagging field when it comes to like investment of time, energy, intentionality. But it pays off if you actually do all the things, like from a team perspective.
And that's so funny, like talking about like going back to the simplicity, even of like the just apply thing. So we used to retype resumes on a typewriter for my mom's clients when we were like little.
That's how we learned to type.
It was so funny when people used typewriters, the resumes were very short, and it was very much like, here's what I can do. Here's what I bring to the table. And it was always included some sort of like kind of actual data points, right? Like real data. I don't know how in 20 years we've gone from like simplicity to this glut, these huge resumes full of fluffy language and everything under the sun. And it seems like now we're kind of starting to go back, because I mean, it's wild to see how things have changed over time. And it's so fluffy.
Well, and again, it is fluffy. And the thing is it's always going to be what they want you to know about them. So I'll go back to sales roles. You could have somebody that's like, I sold $3 million in Q1 and $4 million in Q2 and $3 million in Q3, and you're looking at it and you're like, wow, that's really good. But what if your quota was 6 million and 8 million and 6 million? That means you were 50% of quota each one of those quarters, but they'll leave that piece out, right? Right? Or vice versa. They'll be like 140% of quota, 160% of quota, 140% of quota in Q3. And you're like, very impressive. They didn't tell you that their quota was 10 grand, like that was one sale, like,
or that they inherited a book of business or something.
Exactly. Like I didn't have to do anything. All that business came to me. Like the context, Caley, to what you said earlier, those are the pieces that are missing. That's why resumes are never going to be the tools. They are 100% the tools that almost everybody uses today, but they are not going to work, and they're only going to get worse, as we've already explained on this call, 50 different reasons why. But that's why you have to flip the script and say, I don't care about your resume. I don't care what you want to tell me about you. I'm just going to ask you what I want to know about you. That's it. Mm-hmm. And then you just answer my questions, and then you and I will both know if this is a good fit. How's that? Like,
it's funny that questions are like literally the one thing that will never go out of this process is the questioning portion of it, like the qualification, the qualifying of the individuals, to make sure that they meet the needs. So fundamentally, do we really need a resume? I mean, I don't know. I think we could survive without resumes, in all honesty.
Keith, has anybody told you that you should adapt this software for dating too? Because I think
like only about 50 times.
Okay, I was going to say, I think this would be great. So let us know when you want seed investment for that.
Funny story. Seriously. The other founder of our company, in the very beginning, when we started the company, was actually on a dating site. And we actually took a lot of inspiration from this one particular dating site he was on that asked questions. Because you know what? Like if you ask those questions, is anything 100%? No. But is it going to very quickly be able to be like, where do you find yourself on the political spectrum? I find myself on the hard right, and then somebody that you get matched with is on the hard left. Chances are, like, okay, I don't want to hear about like some Netflix show where they come together and they love each other because they're so strong. Chances are that ain't gonna work, right? Somebody on the hard right and the hard left, that's probably not going to work. Right?
It's a Hallmark movie in the making, right there.
Yeah. But in reality, that's never going to work. So just just be honest. Can we just be honest and say, these are the things I care about. These are the things that I don't care about. And then you can get real, much better matches. And
It works better for everybody. I mean, I think we're lacking with the convoluted way that we have the system set up right now. Is there is no honest conversations that are going
No
on, right?
clarity.
There's no
anyway.
clarity. Yeah, and so it actually it's a negative experience for everybody involved,
Yeah.
no matter what, because then you don't get the right outcomes. Like our outcomes are not high quality because of the way that the system is structured. So I don't know. Yeah, I think we definitely need to have a follow-up conversation with AI stuff for sure, because there's a lot with that.
What's really kind of shocking and sad and a little bit, Caley, about what you just said there is that there is an enormous amount of data that's out there about how broken this process is. Okay.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if you're somebody that's like, well, people tweak data to be what they want, fine. I'll even agree with you to an extent. Push all the data to the side. Just talk to people. Anecdotally, ask anybody that's looking for a job, how's it going? Is it going pretty good? Are you finding it to be a really refreshing process? Nobody is going to be like, oh yeah, it's been amazing. I applied to 10 jobs. I got 8 interviews. Like, no, everybody is frustrated from the candidate side. The hiring managers are frustrated. The recruiters are frustrated. But again, I come back to this field has got to change. And I'll tell you one other stat that I just read the other day that is really scary. Is that I speak to a lot of founders that are in this space, okay? And I've spoken to a lot of VCs as I've tried to raise money. And a lot of VCs have just flat out said, we don't invest in HR tech, flat out. And I'm like, ooh, that's an interesting statement. Why is that? And they've given some very honest answers. Like they don't have the money, they don't have the budget authority, they don't have the strategic wherewithal to know how to purchase these, they don't know how to buy things, period. They don't know how to sell to internally to the executive suite. Like they just run through this list, right?
Yep.
So they say, we just flat out, your technology sounds amazing. Totally understand the problem. Totally understand that how you guys are solving it. It's unique, cool. We're not going to invest because we don't invest in this field. What I saw the other day really scared me because I saw a work tech report that came out that said that globally in Q1 of this year, there was $1 billion that was invested into the what I would call work tech. That's everything involved in work, like anything related to, anything, benefits or any software is related to that. That's not a lot of money, by the way. $1 billion worldwide is not a lot in the investment community. $54 million globally was invested in talent acquisition. Like that is a minuscule amount of money. So what you're going to see is less tech companies coming in trying to elevate this because less companies are willing to invest. And if you don't have budget, you're going to struggle as an entrepreneur. If you don't have runway and you don't have capital, you're going to really, really struggle in today's environment. 15 years ago, you could just good old hard work and grit, and you could probably turn your company into something. It's not the same way anymore. If you don't have capital, man, I would say good luck to you. Like it's going to be a slog, especially in the space that we're in. So when you see that only $54 million globally is being invested in TA tech, that should scare everybody because that means we're going to find just less and less companies are going to be putting new technology, and these old ways that we've been talking about that don't work well at all are going to continue in the future for at least for the foreseeable future for quite some time.
I would agree. And I think the other piece of that is the companies that are big enough to be getting some attention in that space, they're just getting gobbled up by the big boys.
Yep.
ADP is going to buy it, or Rippling's going to buy it, or, like Gusto. Now suddenly everybody's tacking on all of these talent acquisitions solutions. And it's just garbage. It's just noise. And as soon as they do those acquisitions, then even if it's on a partnership level, all of the innovation is being stifled, because then talent acquisition and the innovation from those companies becomes a function of an add-on feature of sales for a payroll feature 90% of the time. And they don't give a shit.
They don't care about TA, right? Like TA in almost every single HRIS or ERP or what, it doesn't matter how big or how small or whatever. It could be the Paycors, it could be the ADPs, it could be the Workdays, doesn't matter, or SAP. The ATS is an afterthought. And it is not something that because it's not a revenue generator. And by the way, it's not going to hold the deal up either, because chances are the head of TA isn't even being invited to that conversation, or the head of HR in many cases isn't. And even if they are, it is many times as a courtesy. But they're like, yeah, we want to hear your opinions. We want to know what you have. I've been in these meetings myself where I was with the executives and they're like, we're bringing HR in, and HR would give their feedback, and then they'd leave and they'd be like, yeah, we're not. No. And I'd be like, well, what about what, so-and-so said about, the HR leader said about, and they're like, yeah, we invited that person as a courtesy. Like, yeah. And that person doesn't know that. They think they were invited because they were actually getting a seat at the table to like, well, here's my thoughts about this. And they did a big analysis and everything. And meanwhile, they're like, that doesn't matter. We could care less about that. We care about the financial aspects, the payroll, like all these other things. So
it's so funny because
So
if I were thinking about like the financial investment of actually investing in TA, right? Having a very solid process, making it easy to hire people, because if you think about problems are either process problems or they're people problems, right? And what we're talking about with TA is both problems, right? And it's something that's inherent in every company, no matter the size of the company, right? Small businesses struggle. They don't have access to a lot of these like big tools either, these TA tools. They're doing a lot of stuff manually. So if you think about it, it's actually a really great sticky investment, because the investment in TA pays off in the long run, because your hiring teams get to spend less time doing hiring. So they get to spend more time doing operations, which is the revenue driver for you. And you get to have higher quality teams in place. And ultimately, you have fewer kind of like, I very rarely talk to a company that says, oh no, we have the perfect amount of people in place. We absolutely are not needing to hire another person. Like we're so smooth. We're running great. No, it's always, we need like 4 more people, but it takes so long to find them and hire them and get them on board. And we just don't have the time and energy. So it's a very unique lack of financial backing for something that has such a global effect and a very impactful effect.
Well, and I think one thing I would say on that too is like having done these conversations with, Fortune 500 companies and then the small people, the one thing Caley and I always come back to is like, fuck it. Let's empower the small business owner, because that's where the impact is, right? And so many people work for small to mid-sized businesses, yet the people who make the big funding decisions are all based off of these mega corporations that, unless you live on a coast, like you're not getting it. So yeah, it's interesting. I also, Keith, I just realized it's 11. We gotta get you out of here.
I'll say this.
Thank you so much for the time. We will track back for sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, he's got a final thought.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna agree with what you said. People in an organization are usually the most expensive and the most important asset that company has. Okay, doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter what they do. Not having the right people in that role will absolutely impact your business positively or negatively. And yet, the intentionality behind ensuring that you have the most locked up process, regardless of how much that costs or regardless what that takes, making sure from the very, very, very beginning that you're identifying the absolute best people all the way through your hiring, your onboarding, and then all the way through managing and everything. That piece is lacked at every company I've been at, every single company. And I think everybody else can share those sentiments. And that is the cornerstone of the problem that people need to solve for. Is you can't say we want the best company, we want this and we want this, then hire the best effing people. That is your best shot. If you don't start there, good luck with the rest of the aspects of the business, right? All right. That's it. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll do another one.
Bye.
Looking forward to it. All right. Take it easy. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.